In 1995, Vampire Hunter was released to a jaded and indifferent public. Vampire Hunter was essentially a revision of its predecessor, and aesthetically, it was more or less the same. The stages were the same, except for two new ones which had been added. The move lists were the same, aside from the fact that each character gained an additional super move, and the music had only a slight rearrangement. I was unable to discover whether or not arcade goers at the time were protesting the changes for a lack of downloadable content, but I can assume that they had the sense to recognize that such things were impossible in the year 1995. However, the gameplay underwent a number of revisions which changed the game considerably and effectively phased out the original installment. First off, two new characters were introduced, the titular vampire hunters. Donovan, a Damphir accompanied by a small child named Anita, and Lele, or Hisenko, as her name was confusingly changed to the European and US versions, a Chinese hopping zombie accompanied by her sister/warding talisman, Linlin, or Mai Ling. Two monster hunters bent on capturing the rest of the cast. Their styles of fighting were somewhat more methodical compared to the rest of the cast, which fit their backstories of being hunters, although they could be as fierce as the rest of the roster when used properly. And everyone looks fierce when compared to Anakaris anyway. The bosses from the first game, Pyron and Phobos, or Wheatsil. What's with all the name changes already? Whatever, they were added as playable characters too, bumping the immediate roster to a respectable 14 characters. Second, the options available to both fighters were tweaked somewhat. The slow option had been removed, which left only the normal and fast settings, at least by default. And a new option was added called Auto Guard. The first 10 hits are automatically blocked by the computer, as long as the player using the option isn't pressing a button. However, it also limited chain combos. They could still be performed, but players had to press all 3 punch or kick buttons at once, and they weren't allowed to chain manually. This means that no matter what you did, the same combos would be used. Speaking of chain combos, that's where the third major change was made. Players could now chain punches and kicks on the same level of strength, which doubled the amount of moves that they could use in a chain. Theoretically, players could go from weak punch to weak kick, then to medium punch and kick, and finally hard punch and kick. This was referred to as the Hunter Chain system, borrowing its name from the title, and the added variety of moves was a great improvement. New ways to attack and recover from attacks were also added. Most characters gained air throws, and players could now tech or escape from normal throws by pressing a punch or kick button. Players also gained the ability to roll towards or away from an attack that knocks down. This was tempered by yet another addition, the pursuit attack. By pressing up and any kick button, players could pounce onto their opponent after a knockdown attack and hit them while they lay prone on the ground. This can be used to add some damage after a particularly damaging move or a combo, but it also puts you smack dab on top of the victim, a position which can be good or bad depending on how it's used. It can actually be used after any kind of knockdown, but it will only connect while they're prone, and the timing for a successful pursuit is strict. But then again, it could also be used to close the distance between players and their opponents. The biggest change that was made to the game was done to the super meter. Now, instead of a standard power bar that drained over time, it was changed to a stock meter that has over 9 levels of stock to play with over the course of a match, and the power carried over to the next round. Also, instead of any special move being powered up automatically, players could now power up their moves by pressing 2 punch or kick buttons and the motions for the move that they want to boost, which would cost 1 stock of meter. In addition, most characters now had 2 supers, or extra special attacks as they were referred to in the game, rather than just 1. Interestingly enough, pursuit attacks were considered a special move as well, so they too could be powered up by pressing at least 2 kick buttons instead of just 1. Vampire Hunter was a solid update to the original Vampire, and became a polished game in its own right, eventually developing into the fast-paced fighter that is recognized as today. Vampire Hunter itself was a transition from the original game that started the series to what would become the definitive game in the series from which all other entries would grow.